So Dr. Jordan, if you would like to adjourn the meeting.
It is 9:01 a.m. on this Wednesday morning, February the 23rd, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we will start off with staff introductions for the record.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Georgiana Kaczynski from the city of Creedmoor.
I'm Jimmy Gooch. I represent the county on board.
Mark Hamlet, Seguasa's utility engineer.
Richard Ballmer, Seguasa Finance Director.
And Scott Schroyer, Executive Director. So thank you, everyone, for being here this morning and kicking off our Finance Committee meeting for February 23rd, 2022 at 9 a.m. So committee members, you see our agenda in front of you this morning. You also see an agenda packet in front of you where we provided you with a lot of materials this morning for certain portions of our presentation. So one of the first items, if you will, is start off with a presentation regarding the Raftellus rate study. And with us this morning for presentation, we have Will Kerr and Melissa Levin from Raftellus. So I'm going to have them share their screen for us this morning for the presentation, and we'll move forward with that. Now, Will and Melissa, I just want to welcome you again this morning. Thank you for participating for us here. I want you to know that the Finance Committee members, as well as staff, has a copy of the presentation in front of them as well. So at least we can see it on screen in front of us here. We're very close to the screen, so we'll get to see that. They also have the presentation in front of them. And what I'm going to ask the Finance Committee members this morning to do is similar to our presentations that we have by our engineer during our board meetings. I would ask the Finance Committee members to put some notes in the margin as we're going through the slides, if you will, please. Let us get through the presentation, and then we can open up questions and come back to those slides, if you will, and move from there. That will help us get through the meeting this morning. You can see we have quite a few slides. There's a lot of information. So we're going to give ourselves plenty of time to get through this presentation this morning. And you will see following the presentation, we also have some budget review topics, some personnel position review, and just some comments or other topics from the committee members as well. So we'll get started from there. So again, I'd like to welcome Melissa and Will. If you will, just please do an opening introduction for us. That way I can at least test your microphone and make sure that we're good to go, okay? And also I need to make sure I can allow you to share your screen. So I will turn that on right now. Sorry about that, Will.
No worries.
Okay, Raftellus team, let me turn it over to you, please.
Melissa, you want to go first and I'll get this pulled up?
I can. So as Scott was saying, I'm Melissa Levin, and I'm here today with Will Carr, and we're both from Raftellus. We're here to, really provide you guys with a kind of where we are with the rate study thus far. We kicked it off, I guess, beginning of January, right after the year started, and met with Richard and Scott. And we've, got some kind of good information that we wanted to share today. So our agenda, what we're going to cover is we're going to just kind of give you guys a little bit of a refresher about what the project scope, is and what the objectives are. We're going to get into some of our kind of rate observations, some of the things that we observe from the rate structure, and then talk a little bit about kind of potential rate structure modifications and considerations, and then kind of end on next steps. Okay, so scope and objectives. We were, Seguasa hired us basically to look at the effectiveness of the existing rate structure. Their existing rate structure was really kind of set up when you guys were created. And sometimes a rate structure is put in place and it worked at the time, worked back 10 years ago, but maybe you've transitioned and you've moved and your objectives have changed a little bit. So a new rate structure might serve you guys better. So we wanted to look at that existing rate structure. We also wanted to create, a 5 to 10 year kind of financial plan that would provide you guys with defensible rates and help you to make sure you're funding all of your operational and capital costs and out over that next to 5-10 years, and really kind of create a financial roadmap for you all. And of course, we want the utility to be kind of long-term sustainable and financially healthy. But today's objectives and what we're really going to cover in today's presentation is we're going to look at some of those kind of our preliminary findings for kind of our rate observations. And like I said, some of those potential modifications that you guys may want to consider to kind of better meet what your goals are currently. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will, and he's going to kind of get into some of the details and walk you guys through the information that we've kind of discovered thus far.
Thanks, Melissa. And good morning, everyone. My name is Will Carr, and I work with Melissa here at Raftellus here in Charlotte. And we've enjoyed working with Scott and Richard over the last month or two to run some preliminary rate analysis, and look forward to the update today. So this first section is going to be more of rate observations and just some things that we noticed as we were reviewing the current structure, the current rate model, as well as customer usage trends and some things we've seen that we have to do as we are calculating, new rates and designing rate structures for your consideration. The first thing that we always kind of take a look at is just some macro level customer usage trends. How have we been trending over the last few years, and using the information, some billing information that Richard provided. We took just a quick look at some high level trends here. And so what we've got in these charts is water and sewer usage, and we've seen some modest growth in customer accounts over the last few years, which is a good thing. Growth in customers and usage is helpful and kind of provides some tailwinds for revenues and other things. We've also seen some increases in usage on the water side of around kind of 2% year over year for the last 3 years or so. And so it's important to remember that there is COVID kind of sitting, there at the back end of fiscal 2020. So there's maybe a little movement going on around there, but just something to keep in mind. On the sewer, on the sewer usage side, we've seen some decreases, in particular in non-residential usage, and likely some of that in 2020 is attributable to COVID, and some of it, I know there's been, some of your large customers have maybe, been doing some things to conserve a little more on the sewer side. So, this is something to monitor because it's really important for rate setting and future, rate increases. As our usage fluctuates, that can drive, the level of future increases that we may need. So this slide is called, a bill frequency, and I'll walk you through this chart that may look, a little confusing at the moment. But what this is a look at your kind of a detailed look at how your residential customers are using water. And so what this chart is showing, these bars, and these dark blue bars here, are the number of bills issued in, and I think this was in fiscal 2021. So it's the number of bills issued at each level of usage. So for example, from 0 to 1,000 gallons, we issued, around 7,000 bills, and for customers using between 1,000 and 2,000, we issued somewhere around 13,000 bills during 2021. So it's a good way to kind of take a look, and you can see medians, average. You can see if there's a lot of kind of usage kind of getting up in sort of in that high usage, elective usage territory. And this line, the line on this chart here, that's just the cumulative percent of bills issued year over year. So for example, from at usage level kind of 2 to 3,000, about 52% of the bill, 54% maybe of the bills that we issue are at or below kind of that 2 to 3,000 usage threshold. So what that means is that our median bill for our residential customers is at or below kind of 3,000 gallons, which is pretty low. That's, we're starting to see that become, more common. But what it means is that there's probably not a ton of elective usage in our residential class, that our residential customers are using water pretty efficiently, and they're not, there's not a ton of usage getting up here above kind of the 8,000, 10,000. There's really not a whole lot of usage up there. And this is important when we talk a little later on about, one of the structures that we modeled. So a couple of observations on your current rate structure. Right now, and these are kind of some observations we compiled, again, looking through the rate model and the current structure. And one thing we noticed is that there's a lot of capital, debt service, depreciation, some other things allocated to the base charge. And so what's happening is that base charge is getting pretty high proportionally compared to your volume charge. In fact, and I'll skip ahead just a little bit, this third bullet, you're recovering about 44% of water revenues and 48% of sewer revenues from your monthly fixed charge, which is a pretty high level of fixed revenue recovery. One thing that's driving that is that there is that 2,000 gallon minimum allowance. And so actually, if you pull that out, if you got rid of that, you'd still be, and you left basically the remaining charge flat, you would still be recovering about 26% of your revenue on a fixed basis from water and 30% from sewer. And we typically see in kind of the 20 to 30% range. So you're sort of on the upper end of that fixed revenue recovery range. And that's without the minimum. Two other quick observations. One thing on the cost of service, sometimes we see, within a base charge, there will be this billing component that's flat, baked into the base charge. And what happens is, basically all customers are paying one component that's flat and another component that's scaled by meter size. And right now, your full base charge is scaled by meter size. And so really, I think kind of the takeaway there is that the differential between your highest meter charge and your lowest kind of meter charge is probably about as high as you want to push it. You probably wouldn't want to push that too much higher. And then kind of one other thing that we wanted to point out, and we'll show this in a couple of different ways on the next two slides. But the more we recover from base, the more costs get pushed to our residential customers. And what's happening there is as our base charge goes up, it's making up a larger proportion of our residential customer bills, and therefore they're sort of becoming more responsible for recovering these costs. So again, two kind of charts to illustrate that. What this chart does is it breaks down our revenue increase recovery. So and we've got these green call outs here kind of to help interpret some of this. But basically, for every dollar increase in base rate revenue, 68 cents comes from our residential customers. So again, they are the ones that are picking up the majority of the increases to our base charges. And then on the volume side, it's a much lower percent because there's not as much usage getting up above that minimum allowance. So for every dollar increase in volume rate revenue, 22 cents is coming from our residential customers. So again, there's sort of this balancing mechanism between our base and our volume charge that we'll want to keep in mind as we're going, as we're planning for the future. One other brief chart here that we thought was really helpful is taking a look at customer bills and analyzing what percent of these customer bills is fixed. So, you know, what that means is what percent of, you know, a couple of customer bills is out of our control, essentially. So for a residential 500 cubic foot customer, and that's about 3,700 gallons, we've got a couple of benchmarks here. And what you're seeing, we do a national water and wastewater rate survey with AWWA. We publish that every 2 years. But the results from the latest survey are shown here in these dark, kind of these dark blue bars here. And so you can see for a 500 cubic foot customer, 3,700 gallons, about 50% of the charge base of their monthly charge is fixed, you know, per the medians from our national survey. Whereas for you all, that's a lot higher. And, you know, part of that is because you've got that 2,000 gallon allowance. So that's, you know, technically fixed. So that's making up a huge portion of these bills. And then the volume charge would only be assessed on the remaining, you know, roughly 1,700 gallons for Seguasa. So you can see, you know, for a low volume customer, which is pretty close to your average customer, you know, we're well above kind of the survey. And I do think keeping in mind that the minimum allowance is in there, and that's really important, but it's still, you know, we're still well above kind of what we're seeing nationwide. And the same trend holds true for the 1,000 gallon customer. It's not quite as pronounced here. But again, some interesting data points. So, and here were our general takeaways on the current, you know, structure. You know, given sort of the history of things and the evolution of the South Granville Water and Sewer Authority, you know, as you were growing and brought on some new systems, you know, there's a lot of debt kind of out there, and you needed strong fixed revenue recovery to make sure that you were able to meet those debt obligations. And so we understand, you know, given the history, why you know some of that was done. But kind of on the other side of that, some of those pricing objectives feel a little maxed out. You know, one thing I mentioned earlier is that base scaling is probably as high as you can push. But also that, you know, the base charges are just high in terms of dollars and proportional to the revenue stream. So that's kind of something to think about as you go forward. Some tools that you have in the toolbox as you're sort of thinking about how revenue is recovered in the future. You know, it's important to consider kind of how much of that, you know, if we need a rate increase, how much of that is coming from base versus how much is coming from volume. And for example, one thing you could do is you could do, you know, a volume only increase, or you could do a base only increase, but it might make sense to focus some of those future increases on the volume side. And then kind of one other thing to point out, and I think you all have talked about this before, or Scott and Richard indicated that you had, that you know, there has been some thinking about around that 2,000 gallon minimum allowance, and pulling that away. That'll, you know, if you got rid of that, and one of the rate options we have, we'll get into some of this in just a minute. But if you get rid of that, you know, there will be a reduction to customer bills that are in sort of that 0 to 1,000 range. And so you'll, you know, if you do that, you're going to lose a little bit of revenue stability as you kind of back that down, but you're going to have those really low volume customers, you know, would be the ones who would benefit. So before we get into some rate kind of structure considerations, I can just pause there and wanted to see if there were any questions or anything.
Commissioner Kaczynski, any questions?
Me first?
Well, no. Dr. Jordan, any questions? And if so, just tell us which slide you're referring to if you have some notes, please.
Slide 10, where you mentioned for every dollar increase in base revenue, 68 cents comes from the residents, which is pretty high. And I guess from what you're saying, if we reduce that 2,000 minimum gallon, would that help from that perspective or not?
I
Or
think
what
that,
can-
Yeah, can you ask the question one more time? I'm
So the
sorry.
was on slide 10 where you talked
This is,
about,
excuse me, this is page 10 of our booklet, actually,
Oh, sorry.
slide 8 of
Slide
your
8.
presentation.
the 68 cents that comes from the residents due to that for $1, every dollar increase in base revenue, 68 cents comes from the resident.
Mhm.
So my question was, what would be the impact if we reduce that 2,000 minimum gallon? Would that decrease that amount at all? Or if not, what would we need to do to try to decrease that?
And it would not really, by removing that 2,000, it would not decrease that. And I'm just thinking, I mean, really in what we put this here for is just kind of to think about kind of future rate increases to kind of push more to commercial industrial. The way that those base charges are set up now, we've got a lot of debt service and a lot of capital being recovered through those base charges. And the way a base charge typically recovers a lot less debt and more billing cost, meter reading, meter service type cost. And so the scaling of that, fits for recovering those costs. It's just right now, the reason that's not working is because there's so much debt and there's so much capital that's being recovered from that base charge. And I'm just trying to think, if we pull that 2,000 gallons out, it would all, and just charge for the base, we would really almost kind of just need to run it to see, but I still think it would be disproportional
Okay.
for the residential customers.
Melissa, can I add something as well, please, to that?
Yeah.
Next question. And I just provided the board members with a copy of our rate structure so they can see the meter equivalencies. I need another piece of chocolate. And I think that the perspective I wanted the board members to have is when we talk about meter equivalencies here, I wanted them basically to see that chart starting at the lowest meter going to the highest meter, because that's what you're talking about.
Right.
About the charges we have built into that meter size versus the volume. I mean, it's all kind of calculated in there, but we've separated those out for perspective for the purpose of saying the way we're set up now on equivalencies for meter versus volume, it seems to be a little bit out of whack, if you will, percentage wise. So that's a reason for this slide here. So now the board members have that in front of them as well to take a look at that. So I just want to make sure that you have that. So you're next, go ahead.
Yeah, and those are, you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you guys are using the AWWA meter equivalency ratios. So it's not really an issue or a problem with those ratios. It's just more the types of costs that are being recovered, and because so much is being recovered from that base that it's what's throwing things kind of out of whack.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Another question, Dr. Jordan?
No, that answered my question.
Okay. Commissioner Kuczynski.
Thank you. You guys have done a great job here. I am really impressed with where we are so far. City of Creedmoor uses your company a lot. I'm glad to be here with this and know that you guys do such a thorough job. My question to you is where you compare residential to non-residential, what did you use as a benchmark to make those differentiations? The meter size?
And this
Or
is-
did you go with company name, customer names?
Is this slide 6 that you're referring
Slide
to?
9.
Slide 9.
Slide 9, okay.
we used the classifications that were in the billing data to do that. But I think that, in general, the residential customers, I think the way that we're defining residential customers is those 3/4 inch, probably mostly single family homes, maybe, some duplexes and stuff that have a small meter. But we just used, if you looked at the billing data that we have on file, you'd see the residential class and it's only 3/4 inch meters. And then there's commercial, and within commercial, there's some 3/4 inch, there's some 1 inch, but it goes all the way up to, up to maybe even 8 inch. So.
But that's what I wanted to find out, and Dr. Jordan had the same question I had, so that's all I got.
And then we also have our board chair, Mr. Gooch, here as well, as an attendee outside of the committee, but I'd offer this to Mr. Gooch. Do you have any questions or comments at this point?
None at this time.
Okay, thank you,
They've
sir.
asked and y'all have asked.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Will, please continue.
Sure. Okay, so the next few slides are just, we put together some kind of sample rate options for consideration, and there's not really a recommended structure at this time. We wanted to put some things together for you all to see. Wanted to show you what the impacts of doing certain things to the structure may look like. So with that, there were 3 kind of structural modifications that we looked at, and really, we're showing them as 3 kind of different options, but really they sort of build on each other. You probably wouldn't do options 2 or options 3 without option 1, and you wouldn't do option 3 without options 1 and 2. So they sort of, they sort of step incrementally. But the 3 things we looked at were 1, removing the minimum allowance, and right now we've just got it removed. But it could be reduced instead from 2,000 to 1,000. Right now we're going from 2 to 0. The second option is doing a tiered rate structure for our residential class. And again, kind of going back to that thing that we just talked about on our residential versus our commercial, you typically only do a tiered structure for residential customers because their usage is homogeneous. It's that nice curve. Whereas in our commercial class, we've got our 3/4 inch, shoe store that doesn't use hardly any water. And then we've got, the federal prison, and that they use a ton of water. So, again, the usage is all over the place. So our tiered analysis is structured on our residential class. And then the other thing that we looked at, but we don't have, really customer impacts built in here, was implementing an irrigation rate tied to kind of the highest tier residential rate. And that's a fairly common practice in rate setting, to price irrigation, since it's, all elective usage, basically. To tie that to kind of the highest priced volumetric rate. But the challenge is that we've got a really low number of irrigation customers. There's just not that much, separate irrigation meter type usage. So, the usage represents less than 1% of our total volume. So it's just, we've got the option in here. If we did it wouldn't be, it's not going to generate a whole lot of revenue, nor is it going to, help kind of move rates around a lot. So it would really be more of a kind of a pricing incentive, or more of a messaging type thing than an actual, big revenue generator. But the one other thing to note is that all of these options are revenue neutral to the current structure. So there's no underlying rate increase in here, nor are we losing any. Would we theoretically lose money if we implemented any of these? They're intended to recover the same level of revenue.
That's important.
So the first option is, again, removing or reducing that minimum allowance. So, basically the kind of the way that we've designed this is retaining our sort of current true base charge and doing away with that minimum allowance. And what happens here is you've got some customers that are using less than 2,000 gallons right now, but they're paying for that 2,000 gallons. So they're paying a little more, based on this minimum allowance structure. So if you pull out the minimum allowance, their bill goes down. And whenever someone's bill goes down, in order to recover the same amount of revenue, somebody else's bill, has to go up. So what happens is the volume, kind of that base charge with the 2,000 gallon allowance, the allowance goes away. So the base charge kind of, on paper goes down a little bit, and then the volume rate has to go up a hair to recover some of that foregone revenue from the less than 2,000 gallon customer. And then the proportion of fixed revenue, which we talked about earlier, there's a pretty decent shift from about 46% fixed revenue recovery to 29%. And kind of one other sort of interesting thing to note here, if you just left the volume rate where it is, and I think right now it's 743, if you just left it where it is and did away with the minimum allowance, it would cost you about $266,000. And that's from water and sewer, and it's about 50-50. So an interesting data point there. That's sort of the, again, if you didn't increase the volume charge to offset, the lost revenue would be 266. So here's what that looks like in terms of rates, and you can see, the combined base charges here. These would go down by about $40 a month, which is not insignificant. However, everyone would start paying for that first 2,000 gallons. And right now, that's included in the minimum, but they would start having to pay for that. And so the volume rate, like we just talked about, would have to go up a little bit by about 25 cents to 768. On sewer, same thing going on here. We've got to start paying for the first 2,000 gallons. Volume rate has to go up about 27 cents to 12.28. So, often the next question is, what does this mean, for our customers? And so what we tried to do here was sort of give you a number of sample customers. So how are people's bills changing under this proposed structure? And what you can see is for that customer that didn't use any water during a given month for whatever reason, their bill goes down quite a bit. 1,000 gallons, their bill's going down. Those folks that are they're using around 2,000 gallons a month, you can see that their bill, they really wouldn't see much of a change. About $1 or so. And then from there, kind of our average or our median customer here, they're seeing about $1 change as well. About $1.50. What happens is, since the volume rate goes up a little bit, the customers who are using a lot of volume are the ones who end up kind of picking up some of this decrease. So you can see here, for our larger volume residential customers, they're seeing a little bit of an increase. And then if we go over to commercial, which is over here on the right, for example, our large, a sample large volume customer down here, they're going to see a little bit of an increase too, as they're kind of picking up some of that lost revenue. But again, this is kind of illustrating that, commercial bills can be all over the place. These are average bills for a 3/4 inch, a 1 inch, a 2 inch, a 6 inch, and an 8 inch meter here at the bottom.
So Will, I think it'd be appropriate for the committee to have an opportunity to question and comment after each proposal here on number one before we would move on to the next option. If the board would like to do that, would you like to stop at this point? Do you have any questions about what was presented or comments?
I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'm just
Overwhelmed
overwhelmed.
with
This
the
is,
information? or-
yes, this
Okay,
is,
Was very
this
helpful.
is
Okay, so,
wonderful.
Not meaning overwhelmed too much.
No, not
meaning-
too much.
no,
It's
it's
just
great information. is
it's
what
great
you're saying, right?
information.
Because
It's excellent
we went
information.
into this, these are a lot of the questions that the board had to
Right.
And we had
the
no
finance
answers at
director,
all.
myself, and we just didn't have this type of information put together. So yes, he's done an excellent job here. Now, something I would like to point out as well, and I would like Richard to jump in comfortably at any time as well. When you look at the chart on the left, Will, the residential sample monthly bills, and you were just talking about 3,000 gallons, for example, we can see the dark bar is the current and the light bar is the proposed here. So if we can take these models eventually, if we wanted to follow something like this, and we could tweak even the 3,000 gallon level to make it more even with what the current is, understanding to be revenue neutral, that would have a bump someplace else, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I want the board to understand as well, that we've provided some examples here, but with modeling capabilities, we have the opportunity to look at a cause and effect
Mhm.
to see this as well, both on residential and then commercial sample monthly bills the same way. Okay.
You know, our biggest, I won't say complaint, our biggest challenge has been the single senior
Right.
woman who lives alone in a house and uses 500 gallons a month and she has to pay for 2,000.
Right.
And that is the biggest complaint that I've had. I had no idea that our house was using 2,000 gallons and I started looking at our bills because they go to Bob and he takes care of them. But I always have felt since I started this for the people who don't use 2,000 and have to pay for it.
Mhm.
And I'm so glad that we hired this company who had the time and the resources to put this data together for us so we could have an actual study and really see it on paper. And I thank you all so much for this.
Pleasure. Well, Richard's done a lot as well, our finance director.
Richard,
Richard, do you have any comments,
This
overall
was a
comments for us on this first scenario?
Not really. The only thing I would make a comment on for the committee is
Mhm.
just keep in the back of your mind is, and it's a very small impact. But when you get down to the 10,000, 15,000 gallon customers, of course, they know they're using that.
Right.
So it's a situation usually with irrigation and so forth, but keep in mind in light of our recent board meeting that this would adversely impact anyone with a major water leak, because right now the current policy makes them pay for water and we adjust off the sewer. So if you had someone that
With
lost
a
50,000 gallons or 100,000 gallons of water, just keep in mind that with that model, it would be a huge hit to them. So you may get increased, you may want to relook at your leak adjustments, that sort of
Right,
thing.
right.
Okay,
If we
got it.
implemented this to, are you gonna allow that increase to be passed on? Or are you gonna consider some mitigation factor for those customers in a water loss event? And you may have, of course, increased complaints from people who do use water seasonally
Right,
Right.
irrigation.
right.
So just keep that in mind. But as a norm, you wouldn't.
Okay.
Because we have so few people that fall into those high usage categories.
Great comments and very timely. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on.
Just
Oh,
for
I'm sorry.
clarification, the zero is actually from 0 to 1,000. And the one is from up 1,001 to 2,000, is that correct? On your scales?
Well, I think that, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the authority bills on a, basically on a per gallon basis. So this would be, for someone who just had nothing go through the meter in a month, this would be someone who had, exactly 1,000 gallons through the meter in a month. We were rounding and trying to get to nice kind of even numbers, but
Up
Those are
to-
just benchmarks
Yeah,
of actually 1,000, not
Yeah,
range.
not up to.
Not range. okay.
Right. If you used 1,000 and there was no base charge, 0 in the base charge,
Got it.
and
Okay.
so forth. And that is correct. We do currently bill per gallon, per rate.
All right, thank you. All right, well, let's move on to our next scenario, please.
Sure. So again, this second rate option, this builds off of that first scenario. And what happens is, again, on the residential side, we're showing the implementation of a two-tier volumetric rate, and tiering residential rates, again, is a fairly common practice, and has certainly gotten more prevalent over the last kind of decade or so. But again, it's important to point out that the tiered structure on residential would go in place, but the non-residential volume rates, those would stay the same. So we're going to sort of maintain the commercial unit costs, so no, no change to them. But then within the residential structure, what happens is as we sort of draw this tier cutoff, and for this scenario, we've done that at 4,000 gallons. And so for customers using below 4,000 gallons or up to 4,000 gallons, you're going to pay, the tier 1 rate. And then for usage that goes above that tier 2, you're going to pay the tier 2 rate. And since this is all kind of self-contained in the residential structure, what happens is when that tier 2 rate kind of goes into place, which is priced higher than tier 1, that helps push down kind of that tier 1 rate a little bit, such that customers who are using more volume are paying a higher volumetric rate on that usage, and that's kind of helping that tier 1 rate stay low for that kind of essential type non-elective usage. So, and I mentioned this really briefly earlier, but the challenge that we're seeing here, and you'll see it on the next slide, is that since there's not much elective usage, since our average is around kind of 3,000 gallons and our median's right there as well, we're just not seeing a whole meaningful amount of water being used above kind of that 4,000 gallons, which is already kind of pushing down to the lower side. I mean, you could push the tier lower to keep pushing use into tier 2, but 4,000 gallons is not a huge amount of water. So here's what that looks like in terms of rates. So similar tables to what we saw before. Base charge, that minimum allowance comes out. So same combined base charges as before. The residential volume rates are where we're seeing the difference. So, what we're showing here is, again, that tier cutoff there at 4,000 gallons. So tier 1 being at $7.03, and then tier 4 being at $10.55. And again, kind of that trade-off is important to note, because if we had a lot of elective usage up and above 4,000 gallons, it may be able to kind of drive this tier 2 lower, but we're only getting, we're only able to do so much given kind of the usage statistics in the service area. Non-residential, same rate as the last option, and then the sewer rates are the same as the last option too. And one thing to note on sewer, typically uniform volumetric charge is the way to go. These are not typically tiered, and often doing it just sort of as one big customer class is the easiest way to do things. Easiest and often most cost justified way to do things. So here's what that looks like in terms of those same customer impact levels. And so what happens is, again, that minimum allowance goes away. So we've got some reductions to bills in kind of the 0 to 1,000 gallon range. We're able to bring down that 2,000 gallon bill slightly, since they're at the tier 1 rate. Same thing with the 3,000 gallon bill. So those are really pretty much flat, even a slight decrease. What happens is the customer who ends up picking some of this up is going to be our larger volume customers. And so they would be the ones who would see they'd have a lot more usage at tier 2. So they would see, some sizable impacts. But again, there's potentially some elective usage here from a small meter customer. And then one final note, these impacts are unchanged from the last scenario because they are the, again, the same rates. I'll pause there again for more Q&A.
Questions from-
So this tier 2 volume structure is basically, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, this is just basically hitting the water. The sewer rates are going to stay the way they are because they have to.
Mhm.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Anything, excuse me, any further questions or comments? Finance committee, staff, team? Well, I had on the agenda also implement irrigation rate tied to highest rate tier. That was something that you just talked about as far as an option, but we're not going to get any further into that, correct? We're just going to wrap up here with some additional Q&A. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was our thinking. I mean, the impact from doing that is so minimal. It helps a little bit, but the impact is so minimal that it could raise more questions than do a whole lot in terms of revenue recovery. So
Very good. I just wanted to point that out again for the board members as well, that it was such a small amount. It wasn't worth teasing out, if you will, any
Yeah.
type of scenarios for that. That was our recommendation, but at least to touch on it.
So,
Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
On the commercial side, what's the net effect going to be on business such as the laundromat on Central Avenue?
Well, would you like to,
And the reason I ask is, they had a complaint about a high bill, a year or two ago. I don't know if it was what led to that.
right, can I ask you, Mr. Chair, are you referring to the second model or the first model with your question? You want to focus on maybe one of the proposed models and then we can look at that as far as commercial?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was on our, would you like to roll back to scenario 1?
sure.
Yeah, how would it be under 1 and how would it be under 2?
Okay, so again, you're looking at some of the changes potentially to those commercial customers, is that
Yeah.
correct?
What the financial impact would be.
Okay,
And that's something we probably can discuss later after we have time to, kind of do an investigation into what the actual usage is from some of these places.
Right, I wouldn't want in public meeting to discuss any particular customer's
Yeah.
usage, but I think it's safe to say, based on the data presented, that you are shifting away from a base model on the residential side to a volume model. And in doing so, your higher volume users, institutional, commercial,
Yeah.
are going to see an increase in their bill.
Right.
I think that's a given when you're shifting the focus from base to model to volume. And naturally, the one you indicated, those types of customers are high usage, your car washes, your laundromats, things of that nature.
That particular instance stuck out in my mind because of, the coming before the board about it.
Right.
About the increase and I don't know if it was a situation where they had an unusual high volume for that particular month or if they were maybe had a leak.
No, in the past, when we've had rate increases, of course, you typically get some negative feedback from your high-end user commercial businesses. So that you will see that as a recurring theme when we've had a rate increase as we had in July 1st of 2020. And so I think to get to your question is those same
That's right. We'll
customers
talk
may
about
reach
this
out to
another
you
time.
at the next rating, if you shifted a model.
Yeah.
Right.
well, and I would like to comment as well that our goal here is to be revenue neutral.
Yeah.
We're looking at this. So if you
Exactly.
take that same perspective and now place it on the business is going to want to be revenue neutral as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can see how this goes. Okay. Board members, any other questions at this point? Because I think we're about ready to wrap it up
I'm good.
with the presentation. Will or Melissa, any comments from you? I want you to stay on board. Don't log off yet, but I just would like to know if you would have any final presentation comments based on where we are today or anything else.
And I guess I was just kind of sitting here thinking, if you remember that chart that Will showed, it was the bar chart where we talked about the bills, the percentage of bills at the different levels.
Right?
So, Will, if we just kind of go back to that real quick, just super quick.
Slide
Yeah.
6.
So this is just a hugely important chart. And I say that because when you think about, shifting and maybe pulling the 2,000 gallons out of that base charge and those people that would actually get a price break, if they're using less than 2,000 gallons. I mean, if you look kind of on this chart, you can see, there are a lot of bills that are between 0 and 1 and 1 to 2. And that just kind of gives you a general feel for how many people are we talking about that would be affected by that. And I don't know, well, can you tell me what those what percentage of the bills never get past that 2,000?
I think it's right around 30%.
So 30% of your customers would be impacted, if they we're talking about people that use less than 2,000. If you pull that out, if you pull out that minimum allowance and just start charging them a true base charge and have them pay for what it is that they actually use. So I think this is a huge kind of important chart just to kind of keep that in mind. And likewise with that, where we draw that tier at the 4,000 gallon, kind of what the example that we showed. I mean, really when your median bill is 3,000, your average residential is 3,300. We're talking about, when you look at that graph, very few customers are getting out there past 4,000 gallons. And I think, if I remember right, I want to say it's like roughly 70% of those bills are below or 4,000 and less. So you're talking about 30% of your customers that would be getting into that tier 2. So just kind of keep that in mind, like those percentages of your customers that would be impacted by some of the changes that we've shown.
And with the lower volume customers, they're normally either single people or older couples,
Mhm.
older couples.
Like you and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, yeah, I fall in that older
That's right.
section. But it does help
Mhm.
with them,
Yeah, absolutely. That's,
with our seasoned citizens,
yes,
so to speak.
seasoned.
You also have a high percentage of vacants in there. Just keep that in mind.
Vacants. Okay.
Now, the non-residential decrease last year, or I think that was because of the schools being closed. And now that the schools we're getting a little bit back to normal and schools, because their children were home.
Non-residential decrease in terms of volume
Usage,
used for what
yeah.
usage?
Yeah, I
Um,
think
I think that.
they showed
I know
that
there
in-
was a slide referencing
Yeah.
sewer usage.
Sewer usage.
In
Oh,
some
okay, I
cases,
thought
but
it was water.
recall, we've had a large customer actually do a sewer meter
Yes,
for
not-
more accurate measurements. So it may be in some of that as well.
Okay.
We tended to see some higher volumes than we expected from water and maybe sewer from residential because of the shift from
Right.
schools back to the home
Oh,
use,
yeah.
all day, those type of things, but we. teased
So
that out.
And that was very common to see during COVID, that kind of, up around your area, the Raleigh area, we saw big shifts of non-residential usage to residential. In fact, residential usage went up in a lot of areas and the non-residential went down. And honestly, the people with the tiered rate systems for residential really benefited from that, just because there was a big shift to the residential class.
So if we did do one of these options, who would set up the rate structure? Would it be us or would it be, so Reptelis would give us?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Right. Before I wrap up on this, Will, did you have anything further that you wanted to add? And then I'll throw it over to Richard for comments.
No, I did. There was one slide at the back, the considerations, and I think, just some things, and you all are just based on the questions already thinking about a lot of this, but, just, I would encourage, as you think through things, to think about some of these considerations. For certain changes, will the benefits, outweigh the challenges? Can the billing system accommodate the changes? That if we really seriously want to consider a tiered structure, we need to make sure that the billing system can accommodate that. Most can, but that would be something to check before kind of getting it out there. And then the customer groups, and we've already talked about some that we're sensitive to, but just some stuff to think about as you move through. But that was the last slide, so that's all I've got.
Okay, and thank you. And Richard, any overarching comments here?
Now, you may be getting to that in a minute, but I think the next steps or the takeaway from this meeting would be to give some guidance to Raftellus so they can prepare that rate model based on the recommendations of either the finance committee or the board to determine next steps. Bullet 3, the billing system. Will, I looked at that after our discussion the other day. I think I'm 99.9% certain that our software will accommodate the tiered structure or, any of the structures you've already set up, including if you go to the irrigation system. And I think some of the members here today have touched on, they're very well aware of the some groups that will be happy about any changes and some groups will not be happy about any changes. And I think that's good to keep in mind, but I think all the board members are very sensitive to that. But great information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
both so very much. This is great.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
Great
okay, so
information.
hang on the line for us, please. So just in terms of some wrap up and some next steps. So I think that we've, as we're moving along the rate study program here with our consultants, Raftellus, and again, they're doing a fantastic job for us. Thank you very much. We wanted to, at this juncture, basically show you what we have discovered, what they have produced for us, and also wanted to provide you with a couple of options, not too many options, just a couple of options here. So it's really appropriate at this time to ask the finance committee, is there an interest in pursuing more data and more examples on both options, or do you have a suggestion, or is the finance committee leaning in a certain direction to say possibly tease out one of the options here? That's really what we would need to know next so that we can provide guidance to our consultants here to further refine the design, if you will, and look at some of the impacts where we haven't gone especially deep at this point, but that's where we are today. And also keeping in mind, as we said in the past, that it's probably going to take us another couple of months to work through this. At the same time, we have in parallel our FY 22-23 draft budget that we're working on. We covered that in the last meeting again today. And we were not anticipating changing a rate model at this time based on getting ready for next fiscal year. So I just want to put that back on the table as well, because I believe that we've had some discussions in the past that we would go through this exercise. We would figure out where we want it to be, have the discussion, and if we were going to make some changes, potentially look at some implementation beyond the start of our fiscal year. So that could be the start of next fiscal year, for example, that we work all this out. So I just wanted to provide that to the finance committee members as well. So I will, at that point, turn it back to the committee and ask us, what are your thoughts on some of the options that you've seen today and some direction that you can provide to the staff here so that we can continue to work with Raftellus?
Well, I'll just start based on what I've heard on slide 12, the structured considerations is that these options are incremental, so can't do one without the other. So if we take a tiered approach, it's like a all or nothing. Is that correct? Can't do option 1 without doing the other options, and you can't do option 2 without option 3, right? Is that my understanding?
Yeah.
Exclusive, aren't they?
You can go the opposite direction. So if you implement 2, well, I'll leave that to Raftellus.
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Richard, you're on it. It sort of goes, it builds the other direction. So if you to be able to do 2 and 3, you need to do 1, and to be able to do 3, you need to do 2. But it's not it's not necessarily, you could just remove or reduce the minimum allowance. That could be, a standalone modification. And then, from there, then you could say, if you wanted to do the tier, you could go that route as well.
Okay,
So basically you can do one without two, but you can't do two without one.
Right.
right.
That's correct.
Okay.
The charts help so much because it shows that the difference is pretty much the same until you get into the higher usage on both options, which is what I've been asking about. And you did say there would, if we did either one of these, that there would possibly be no effect on revenue because where we drop in one area, we increase in another. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Revenue
So why
neutral.
can't we do it this year?
That's a time problem.
I think we're a little bit, I'll ask for Richard to help me answer this question here, but by the time we would work through this and try to get a budget passed in May,
Yeah.
I don't think that we could be in a place where we would have this all nailed down and understand our rate charges and our public hearings and everything to actually get this worked
Oh,
out.
yeah.
But I think that we could, I think that where we are in this position, which is exactly where we wanted to be, we're setting ourselves up
For next year.
this next year to work through this and then be able to, when we start working on our budgets, for example, we start November, December,
We start
October doing
November.
projections. So we
Right.
would, if we can have this sold, if you will, on if there's going to be a change and we knew that by September 1st, for example,
Right.
by the board, then we could start to plug that in and then run our budgets and work forward from there.
Any actual change will be implemented.
The next fiscal
The
year.
next
is when it
year,
would kick in,
yeah. Okay, I like that option.
I want it today.
Well, that's a timing option. That doesn't
Want it
deal with the
today.
options that we have in front of us here, so.
Right.
Which one?
I would say
which
one and
do you
two.
like better?
I would say we need to do 1 and 2 because we don't have a lot for option 3, but
Where's option 3?
that was the implement irrigation that we
Oh,
were
okay.
tied to.
Yeah, I think we should do
There's some huge benefits. for us.
2 incorporates 1, so the 2-tier volume structure.
Yeah.
I would like that one the better. Because to be honest with you, the commercial sample monthly bill, it's only a $4,000 difference on the chart on slide number 18 and the other slide, which is 15. There's only a $4,000 or $5,000 difference for the commercial. And again, commercial companies can write it off as overhead.
If they use more, they should pay for more.
I agree. And if you use less, you shouldn't have to pay for what you didn't use.
Now, remember, in small business.
Right.
This takes, you get that deduction at the end of the year, but it affects your cash flow during the
Oh,
year.
during the year, absolutely.
Okay, so if I may just summarize from what I'm hearing from the finance committee, if I look at our page 18, which is slide 16.
Mhm.
So we look at a 2-tier volume structure for residential. The alternative structure includes build office scenario 1, remove the minimum allowance, which I think is, we all understand that, correct?
Yes.
And then we also look at a 2-tier volumetric structure, residential class on water. So we're really aiming towards scenario 2, which is the 2-tier volume structure for residential. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just want to be clear on that, because I think that's what we're honing in on.
Yes.
Will, quick question for you, or Melissa. Nationwide, when you see a tiered system, how much customer confusion do you see with that system? Is it something that there's an adjustment period for the first year or two and then customers kind of get the grasp of it? And the reason I ask that, because between options 1 and 2, it's affecting the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 gallon customer, but you're talking a minimal $1 one way or the other per month. And I'm just curious, how confusing is that to the customer base?
I mean, I'm just thinking when we've implemented those tiered structures, it's not overly confusing. There was a big push, in 2010, around in that area to put in conservation rates to really kind of discourage discretionary water usage. And really kind of targeting that usage that's kind of quote unquote extra for a typical household. Honestly, I think it's for the most part kind of intuitive, and especially when you consider those folks that are using 8,000 gallons and are getting that higher rate are still getting that lower rate for the first 4,000 gallons. So if you think about it, an 8,000 gallon user, it's kind of netting out. They would be paying the same as kind of what the commercial class is paying. It's just those that get up and over kind of that 8,000 gallons that really start paying more.
And do you typically see, when you implement a tiered rate system, do you typically see usage decline, therefore revenue decline?
Sometimes you will, especially if you have large amounts of irrigation. You guys do not have a lot of irrigation, but for areas that do have a lot of irrigation, you will see, a little bit more, especially with a 3-tiered structure. In that 3rd tier, you'll see a little bit more revenue volatility out there. Because they can, a lot of it is really discretionary, and they can reduce that usage, and you'll see that impact of folks reducing it.
Right. And my last question, all these options that you presented to the committee today, none of those change the percentage of capital and debt service in the base rate. They all deal with removing volume charges, volume scenario.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
So we don't reduce revenue stability in these options at all.
Yes, that is correct.
Will, would you go back to slide 17, back one slide, please? Okay, so some of my thoughts. We all understand what we're doing here as far as base and volume charges and how we're proposing implementing the different tiers. I mean, this is a structural change, which is good, and it may benefit us in the future if there's additional tiers that we want to build in to our rates. If we don't move to something like this, we may be facing the same structure change in the future. So that may give us pause to think that this may be a good opportunity with changing the base at the same time and dividing this up, developing these tiers. You can see it's wholly a rate model structure change, which may benefit us moving forward,
Right.
as well as we look at maybe some different classes coming on board where it's tweaking tiers now. So it could be a 3-tier or a 4-tier or a
Right,
sub-tier
right.
as well. I think we could build from that. So,
Greensboro has a 3-tier.
okay, not proposing it at this time, but
Right.
again, you're creating that foundation that we could possibly move in that same direction.
Yeah.
Okay,
Future planning ahead.
yeah, exactly. Okay.
And one other thing, and I'll just kind of throw this in there. Right now, we've got a 1.5 differential between those 2 tiers. We could close that gap and put a little bit of a smaller differential so that there's the difference between the 2 tiers is not as big, if that makes sense. So what you would see would be that 703 would increase a little bit, and then 1055 would kind of come down a little bit. So that is an option.
All right, so you're saying that the 0 to 2,000 gallon at 703, the 2004 would be greater than 703, and that would then possibly bring down the greater than 4,000 gallon value as well, correct? That was your point?
No, I'm just saying, no, because the right now the 0 to 2 and 2 to 4 are the same, because we've just put the 2-tiered structure in. But if you look at what I'm saying is there's a rate differential between the 703 and the 1055 that's 1.5 right now. That can be reduced, and we could do a little bit of a lesser nudge towards that larger tier. Instead of doing like a 1.5 between 1.5 differential between the 703 and the 1055, it could be more like a 1.25. But then what the effect would be that 703 would increase and the 1055 would decrease.
Okay.
The difference between the two rates would not be as stark.
Got
And a lot of times, and I point that out, a lot of times when utilities go to a two-tiered structure, they will kind of have this gentle nudging more towards a two-tiered structure, just to kind of move in that direction. And so you're not seeing as big differences, but that could be something we could look at.
It would be that huge.
Yeah, might be a huge gap.
I like that idea.
And someone might also question, well, why do you have the two-tier volume and the same rates are the same? Why not just lump it all together?
Together.
So there needs to be some, and this is the reason for this meeting, to have this discussion. So again, I just want to make sure that we as staff are clear that this is the model we're going to pursue.
Yes.
And further refine this, tease this out a little bit as we
Yes.
move forward. So, okay, very good. And then what we would like to do then is a team here is eventually close out this meeting, and then we will double back with the Revtelis team and talk about what our next steps are. I do envision coming back to the finance committee just to kind of show you where we are. And then at some point, I think that it's appropriate to have the finance committee make a recommendation to the board. We do a presentation to the board as well, providing them with somewhat of an overview here of what we've done, where we are, and where we are today, and maybe what we're proposing as far as moving forward with this for the entire board.
And I think that will help with customer complaints. I mean, we'll try to get the word out to them about what's coming before it happens. And the more we like advertise to our customers that things are going to be changing to their benefit, maybe that will cut back on the customer service phone calls and the
Yeah.
complaints on social media, which Jimmy.
Well, at least in that area. That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not
if
sure
we,
if it'll negate
whatever
everything.
we
Right,
can
then
do to
Right.
mitigate that.
Yep.
I mean, we can only try.
Well, it also addresses that they've asked in the past that we done this? We can now say, yes, it has been done, and these were. our
And to be honest with
recommendations.
you, I think
So
this
that they-
was the
They'll
well
know that
spent
their
funds.
voices have been heard, and that's really what customers want, is to know that their voices have been heard.
Very good.
So
And
thank you all
also,
very much.
This should give you a chance to check and make sure that the billing system's going to accommodate all this.
I will check that.
Being only
definitely.
99.9% sure, I think.
I
Yeah,
think it's
99.9.
close. It's like
I
Dove.
want, I want to be 100% sure.
All right, well,
Yeah, we won't be 100%
May I-
because that's
may I ask
another
the-
expense.
I ask the finance committee members, as we close out here, could we wrap this up, put the recording on pause and take
Yes.
maybe a couple minute break while we get ready for our next topic? Would that be okay?
That would be
Great.
great.
All right, so Will and Melissa, on behalf of the Saguasa Board and staff, we thank you very much
Yes.
for the
Thank you.
presentation and the work that you've done to this point. Rich and I look forward to doubling back with you. Maybe we can, I'll just have Richard arrange a phone call for us, our next conference, and we'll continue to work on this. So again, thank you so much for all that you've done for us, okay?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Talk to you later.
Like to stand in it, 2-minute recess?
Yes, 10-minute recess.
All right, thank you.
and/or connection within the roadway. Same thing with the sewer service. We just had it broken up as a short side and long side. And we wanted to put something in here about if the connection was made within the roadway. So and the note below was updated. Sewer service connections that require road crossings, connections within the roadway, and or tying to a manhole will be performed by a contractor and applicant, with applicant paying for the actual cost plus 10%. Now that's a note that was in there. We had the cost plus 10% there. We did not have that shown on the water side. I don't know if Scott, that's something we want to go back and add.
Sure. If you notice, there's some inconsistencies here before we do a final production that doesn't affect materially the cost of anything, because that's really what we're proposing here is the costs associated with some of these changes or modifications that we'll bring to the board. So some wordsmithing is okay. And
Okay.
I'll take an opportunity at this point as well to tell you that I'm going to reformat this document as well.
Okay.
When it's presented to the board, just to clean it up and put some outline numbers and some table numbers in there, because in a table of contents, so it makes it easier for us to follow this, because a lot of people use this booklet to look up certain items.
So the 10% is why? To cover administration
Yes.
costs?
Yeah, I mean, if we have to run a contract through us, it takes my time, it takes Richard's staff's time.
Right.
And if it's high enough, it takes our time. Okay,
Right.
all right.
So you'll add that.
So
to
you're
the
gonna
work-
add the 10% to the water side too?
For consistency.
Yeah, it didn't even register to me until just now, but
Okay.
when I just reviewing it right
Very
now
good.
out loud, caught that part, so. All right, next up is a new category. This is the water and sewer tap incidental fees. So when we originally put the prices together for the taps, I worked with our utility crews to determine the labor, the materials, the equipment, the time it took to perform these. So, for example, the $1,800 complete water service installation tap for short side, that's what the average cost is. Some may come in actually a little higher, some may be a little lower, but that's the average cost, and that's the tap fee that we went with. But that does not include some of these incidental fees or incidental items that we kind of realized over the past year. And we felt that's something that we needed to add to this for clarification. So just to run through this, some water and sewer taps may require labor, materials, or equipment beyond what is assumed with the standard installation fees. These fees may include the following, which the applicant will be responsible for. So the first of these is traffic control. So we had a water tap off of 56 going towards Wilton last year, which that's a DOT road. We had to get in the pavement. DOT requires road closures. In that case, we end up having to hire a traffic control consultant to come in at about $1,200 a day to perform the traffic control for us to meet the DOT requirements. If we have lane closures on municipal streets that our guys can handle, that's less time and materials. There'd be a lot less charge. But what this does allows us to clarify what those costs are. Just let folks know that if we are doing taps in roadways, that traffic control could be a part of it. Subsurface investigation.
Mark, I got
sorry.
when you hire these subcontractors, they are not only DOT, but they're also OSHA compliant.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. They have to have all those certifications.
We're just saying that with all the respect that this was because this type of traffic control level was required on that highway. It's demanded, and we can possibly reduce a little bit on some side streets, but we still have to follow all the safety regulations for traffic control. So
Run into some issues in the past with OSHA and traffic control work zone safety.
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure that base was covered also.
Yeah, and that's why if we do work in an NCDOT major road, 15 or 50 or 56, it's smart for us to hire a licensed traffic control company that has all those certifications, that knows what they're doing, that meets all the DOT guidelines, certified by DOT, versus us trying to go out and do that.
It's cheaper than a citation from OSHA.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
all right, so yeah, the subsurface investigations, touch on that, and also the asphalt concrete repairs.
So subsurface investigation, So in a lot of road shoulders, as you'd expect, there's telephone, there's fiber optic, there's gas lines, there's all types of other utilities that are underground. Anytime we do a tap, we call a locate company to come out. They do it for free to mark on the side of the road. It's required for any construction. They come out and they mark approximately where those lines are, but obviously we're going underground. We don't know how deep they are.
Right.
So we have to, from time to time, hire contractors to come out with their back trucks to pothole where they basically vacuum up dirt down to find the depth of the line. So we know how deep that is. So when we perform our water sewer taps, we don't hit those lines. Fiber
They're
optic,
not free.
if you hit a fiber line, that's bad. It's very expensive. So, but that's in some cases that's required. Some places there's no issue at all, but that's something that's not covered with the standard fees. So if we need a half a day of potholing service, we want to clarify that we're going to be charging that service. Asphalt and concrete repair. So some water and sewer taps may require removal and replacement of additional asphalt pavement, concrete curb and gutter, and concrete sidewalk outside the scope of the standard installation fees. So, if we have an open cut in a pavement, we're assuming that we have to cut the pavement just as necessary, but there could be some cases where we end up having to tear up a lot of additional concrete, additional sidewalk, additional curb that has to be replaced, is not included in those standard fees. And we want to clarify that we will have to charge to go back and replace that.
What about that this is only for installation, this is not for repair?
No, this is incidental fees on top of the tap fees. So,
Right, for installation,
Right.
not for repairs.
right. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So, and then we put the caveat here, this list does not include all possible incidental fees that may be associated with the installation of water sewer taps. Seguasa reserves the right to charge additional fees as required for non-typical service taps. However, all fees will be provided upfront on the fee summary sheet and provided to the customer prior to any work being performed. So we don't want to just be tied down to these three, because I guarantee that over the next year, we'll find some new non-typical things pop up that were not incorporated.
Mark, you hit on a key point here, your fee summary sheet. So just briefly here, the fee summary sheet is a worksheet that Mark works up for any project, and it lists all these things that we have to do. It's like a menu and the associated costs, and he checks the box and says, this is what it is, and adds everything up at the bottom. And then so the person that we're doing the work for knows what those charges are, and then also our billing office up front knows how to collect that money and what accounts it goes into as well. So there are no surprises here for the customer, if you will, or the contractor. We simply say, this is what it's going to be ahead of time. There are some incidentals. We may bill you for this. We may only have to bill you half for that, but be aware that these are those costs. So again, we as a business are trying to be realistic in identifying our cost of service and billing for that accordingly, and not just put that on the ratepayers for some other construction. So,
Right.
All right, Mark.
And that fee summary sheet, it goes out with every allocation request. So if somebody submits an allocation, obviously they're going to have a water meter and a sewer tap for that. So along with the allocation approval letter goes that fee summary sheet, where we research all these fees beforehand so they know what they're getting into. So any incidental fees we would identify upfront, and they would not be surprised by that.
Mark, in your research that you've done on this, have you found, probably working with Richard about very many things that Seguasa has absorbed the cost for years, and it should be passed on? Have you found it a lot?
Well, I know that previously I think water tap fees were $500. So that was a $500 tap fee, and the cheapest water tap fee on here is $1,800. So that just tells you just one item there.
Yeah.
Where money was being left on the table, or it was costing us when we should have had customers paying for them.
Right.
So, and those fees, that's just covering costs. That's the,
And then that's exactly what I'm saying, is we are covering our costs on these,
right. I mean, we're
so
not,
that the ratepayers don't have to pick it up and find a way to pay that.
right.
And I'm glad we're doing this.
Okay. All right, the next topic is under the allocation review fee. So when somebody submits an application or the allocation review or allocation request form, we have a fee associated with that, because it takes time for me, it takes time for our field staff to go out and do some investigation on site. So that covers just a little bit of that time. Before, we had it broken up into, we had a $250 fee for single family residential, then we had a $500 fee for commercial greater than 400 gallons per day, and then we had a $500 fee for commercial, excuse me, was residential over 400 gallons a day, I'm sorry, and then another one for commercial industrial developments. Basically, what we need to do here, what I think, is just break this up into basically, it's a $250 fee for anything under 400 gallons per day, because we can handle that approval internally at the staff level. Anything over 400 gallons per day has to go to the board for approval. So obviously that takes the preparation of the board documents. So that takes more effort on our end. Scott and I both have time in on that to put the board agenda items together. So basically what this does is any single family residential or commercial construction that's less than 400 gallons per day is just at $250, since you guys don't have to approve that at the board level. So anything over 400, which would be residential, commercial, or industrial developments, would be that $500 fee.
And if the board approves this, it'll be effective July 1st, right?
Okay, synonymous with our fiscal year, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and the last item is, this kind of goes along with the plan review fee. We've got plan review fees now based on the amount of water line that goes in. We didn't change any of that, but along with that, we've got a water and sewer modeling review and analysis fee. So we're currently working with a consultant on the development of sewer models. You know about the water model we're working on STEM. So
Creedmoor.
yes, I'm sorry, I said STEM. Yeah, Creedmoor. I'm sorry.
Wait a minute, where's mine?
I apologize.
Creedmoor, wait a minute, Mark, Creedmoor, are you sure?
I will know it when I see it, that it's not, that it's STEM and not Creedmoor, believe me.
So yeah, the water model is Creedmoor. The sewer model, we started on STEM because it was smaller.
Right.
And we thought we could knock that community out first on the sewer model. So as we continue to develop those models, developers, when they submit information for their developments, we're gonna have to incorporate all that in our
Okay.
models and just kind of double check their calculations and make sure that the system can actually take the flow that they're requesting. So basically what we got here is we're saying that the modeling review fee, this fee covers Seguasa's consulting engineer services is required to perform water sewer modeling review and analysis of the proposed development's water sewer model as provided by the developer's engineer. So we don't have a set price for this right now. I don't know, over time, we may actually define what a cost, a good average cost would be, but I don't know what to quote right now since we haven't dealt with this yet. So what we would do is our on-call engineer, anytime a developer came to us and we needed to do this modeling work and review, we would just get a fee from them, what it would cost. So if it's 500 or if it's 1,000 or whatever the number is, that would just be added to the plan review fee.
So we would keep a consulting engineer on retainer. Because you
Well-
can't swap them around. It would
Well,
be the
we're-
same engineer.
We're doing that presently.
Right.
But if you had your own team member that was doing that, it could be done in-house as
Right.
well. So the idea is here, as we build these models for both collection and distribution, and a developer comes in and wants to put the development in, we have the ability to say, here's the model that we have. You can take that data at that point, but you have to develop your model on your side as far as what effect it will have.
Right.
And then we can bring that back into our model to run that same analysis and figure out what's going on in that subdivision. So this is really where we're moving in this environment. And the quote to be provided, obviously, is we do not know how much detail they have or information they have to do, but we'll provide that list that they're required to provide us for output, and then we'll run the models and critique those as well. So that's how we're moving forward with our business, so that we can understand the effects. And sometimes you will have effects downstream of where development comes in. So we're not just looking at the development, but I want to say, if they break the system further downstream 2 or 3 manholes, then there has to be a fix for that as well, for them to come into that system at that point. So that's how this all works together on capacities and upgrades for equipment downstream of an entry point, for example.
So their engineer would do their model and then present it to Mark.
They
And then
would
Mark
provide us.
would figure out how it works into our
Right.
model that we have.
We'd run it through our model then.
Okay.
And just to
To
verify.
see if it'll work before we say yes, okay.
Exactly.
All right, good.
I mean, that's work that
Checks and
historically has
balances,
never been
right.
done. And there was no really good feeling for how much capacity is in the lift stations. And this is something that's really going to work towards improving that. And we'll know, long term, how much capacity we have, what impacts this is having on development. So
No more surprises in the future.
Right, exactly.
we don't like surprises. So, but these are not substantial changes, but I think after the past year, these are changes that we kind of identify and we feel that are important. So, and I imagine a year from now, there'll be more
More
red
stuff,
text to review as well. So,
It just provides clarity, which is great. So
And
thank you.
transparency.
Yes.
Yeah.
And recall, this is kind of a new project for us in terms of defining the stimulus catalog, if you will. So at some point it will kind of subside as far as the changes that we're seeing here. But we anticipated this within the first couple of years
Mhm.
as we were getting up and running, especially on the construction side of things through engineering. So
This is good to have now before we do the I-85, because once that's done, we're gonna be flooded.
we can work the kinks out of it now.
That's
Right.
right.
And then when the developers are here, we
Quite
got,
honestly, we see that a couple of years out and we're saying, what do we need to do to prepare ourselves for that? Yeah. All right, well, Mark, thank you. Committees.
see, Richard, we're covered for you. Don't you worry, we got that money coming in.
Don't cash any checks yet, but that money's coming in, Richard, right?
What do I always tell you? I don't see it on the bank statement. Until I see it on the bank statement, it's not real.
Right.
It's not
That's
real.
right,
All right.
exactly.
Well, if we may, I'd like to thank you, Mark.
Sir.
Mark's
Yes,
up
thank
again
you,
on this
Mark.
next topic. Well, let me just kind of scroll the screen here and do an intro as well. So our next topic for our proposed budget review topics is the capital improvement program, CIP proposed plan overview and update. So one of the projects we've been working on quite extensively the last couple of years is we've identified that we have somewhat of a skeleton of a CIP that was developed a few years ago, but we really did not have a fully developed or robust capital improvement program plan in front of us, which gives us the ability to look at the demand for our money aligned with the demand for our infrastructure repairs, whether it be for sanitary sewers, water lines, new water towers, water plants, you name it. You look at all of our infrastructure that's out there. So it's important for a business operation entity such as ours to have this long-term plan to identify these needs and these expenses and priorities of projects coming up in front of us. Additionally, this is a very important document when it comes to looking far ahead at your rate models down the future. So we really haven't had this component. We've had parts of it, but we really haven't had, again, this robust program. So it's something that we've been working on really since Mark came on board for us. Now, it's quite an extensive project for many reasons. And we're going to show you this morning in this meeting a proposed plan and overview of what we're doing as an example of what we're aiming for. But really what feeds into the CIP is understanding, first of all, where are your assets? Okay, where's the location of them? What's their material, their size, and their condition? So those are all important features that we are working towards as far as our condition assessments. That will help us prioritize our infrastructure, where it needs to fall on the schedule in terms of priorities of other items. And then, of course, we balance those needs against what we actually have financially to spend, whether we do as a cash funded basis or we do a combination of loans, grants, and cash basis for those programs. So that document is coming together for us. My goal was to have that document really in place for us, finished by this fiscal year. And I'm not sure if we're actually going to meet that target. We'll talk about that as well. But we may have enough of a document created here that we could still present something to the board this fiscal year in our budget review for approval, which will be helpful. So we may not wait until next year. We may be able to do something this year. We'll just have to see how this shapes up. We mentioned this here potentially because we know that anytime that you apply for funding, whether it be for grants or loans, a lot of times they want to see those board approved capital improvement plans. And I know Mark has been working towards that as well. It's identified that a 10-year plan is really where we need to be. We have needs beyond 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years that we'll identify. But truly, as an organization, we'll look at a 10-year plan and we'll really fine tune the 5-year plan as we're moving forward, because that's really realistically what we're able to build and prepare for. But it's a fantastic planning document for us because we could say today that this is what we need to start engineering design work on for construction 3 years from now. It also helps us with the financing, and what we need to do to get prepared for that. And the other side of that is that once we get to that point, then there's the execution of that work. And that's a whole nother side that we have to address moving forward. How are we going to manage those contracts? What are we going to do in-house? What are the routine programs? And there's also some big decision points for us. And I'll throw out, for example, in the future, we may have some large structures that we have to look at as far as financing or replacing those type of things, or maybe cash as you go. Those are discussions that we'll have in these finance committee meetings, obviously with the board, as we're looking at the schedule. So you could anticipate in next year's finance committee meetings, getting ready for the next budget period, 23-24. It's challenging to say. We'll be having a session reviewing our CIP schedules along with our operating budgets to see how all those come together for our complete budget picture. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's
Okay. Richard, would you like to add anything before we jump into these examples on CIP just in general, or where we are on schedules? I mean, those two work hand in hand as far as, you know, the financing, the construction side here. So we all work on the CIP, but
No,
okay.
I think that's good.
Okay, very good. So, all right, so what we have here, and I'll have Mark kind of walk through this, and I've provided an example in the book for us of a CIP program example. This version is actually taken from Owasso, our neighbors to the west, I believe. And Mark spent some time with Owasso in the last year, basically just researching their program and picking some of their finer points of how we can move on with our program. So Mark, what I would like to do at this point is just kind of turn this over to you. And of course, I don't need to walk through all these slides, but just guide me, if you will, as far as what you want to touch on here. Okay.
Okay, so Owasso, I reached out to them. I'd worked with them some in the past. And then I know they are pretty close to the scope of the type of work. I mean, they're an authority. They're not a municipality. They're an authority like we are. So I thought they'd be a good source to talk to about this. And they've also been around a lot longer than Owasso has. So they're a lot farther down the road than we are in the development of this type of thing. So I use their CIP as a guide. You can see this slide here. This is from their table of contents. This shows the different categories of how they've broken their CIP up. I have done the same thing with ours. We don't have quite as many categories. They have reclaimed water, a couple other things here that we don't. Either I combined into one or we just don't have, but it made sense to have it broken up into categories based on the type of work it is. Beyond that, we don't really need to get into too much on the assumptions or anything, but just past this, the next page, they have an overall summary table. This is from the very beginning of their document. You kind of see what their 5-year plan is for each one of those categories. I'm planning on providing the same thing, but looking at a 10-year plan. So we've got categories, and we'll get to this. I'll share my screen shortly, but I've got categories 100 through 108, where they have 270 through 280. And you can see a summary of all the overall costs. The next page, this is the first document for one of their categories, category 272, water treatment facilities. And I'm planning on modeling ours the same way. So they give a brief background and description of the existing facilities incorporated in that category. And then beyond that, so you have the category 272. Next page of this, you have a summary table of all the different projects. So that at the beginning, you had an overall summary of what every category was. And then in the introduction to this category, you see what the total is for the projects they have identified in this one category. And then the last page that we've shared with this just shows one of their projects, 272-42. It gives a description of that project, and then it gives a summary table breaking up the funding requirements for planning, construction, inspection, and so forth for that project. So I thought this was a very good, a good starting point for us. And I have started developing this for our system. So Scott, I don't know if I can, you want me to go ahead and share my screen?
Yeah, let me just make a couple of comments, if I may, Mark, before we move on. Which is back up a little bit on top here. There's a reason why I selected a couple of slides for this out of 165 pages. There's a reason why I did this, okay? But I just want to, I'm going to roll back to page 31 in our agenda booklet here. And something I touched on briefly was our funding source, our funding strategies as well. And you can see exactly here on a macro scale, they're looking at identifying their funding sources in terms of the use of cash, potential bonds and loans and grants at the bottom as well, to let us understand what we're projecting in terms of how we can finance this project as well. So that's an important table that is part of this program as well, moving us in that direction. So I hope the Finance Committee finds this this approach pleasing in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. And again, we're going to expand this out to a 10-year program. What's also important is that we're going to have projects beyond the 10-year phase. So we will also develop a schedule of projects that sit beyond that period, and we'll have an opportunity to reference that schedule, probably in planning meetings, most likely to see, well, what's just outside the 10 years? What do we have at the 15-year mark? Well, what are these priority projects that may cost a lot of money at year 20, and how do we get ready for those? And then we have to have discussions strategically. This is how this all comes back to the strategic plan. Okay, in that session, we can now say, this is what we see on the far term. How are we going to deal with this? What decisions are we going to make? So they all start to come together, strategic plan, CIP, budgets, rates, all part of our business model. So that's something that's ahead of us as well. So just wanted to point that out. Also wanted to point out, let's see, something I really like in this diagram on the bottom of our page 33.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting when we talk about water treatment facilities and we do our background pages. I think that showing in this example sufficient capacity is WTP for next 50 years. I think that's something that we will want to present as well, so that we can understand that we need to have some capacity adding projects potentially. And where do those sit? Where are we now? You know, we need those perspectives at the same time. So we'll develop these kind of graphics at the same time, so we have those perspectives. Those are just natural questions. What do we look like 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now at the same time? And what are we getting ready to move towards? So I want to point that out.
It's really important considering that I-85 project is going to be done someday, and we're going to need to know we've got the capacity for these buildings.
Well, there is business beyond us in the future. Would you agree? I mean, that's something that we're preparing the Seguasa for. So I think if we get these foundational pieces in place, and then the business itself can continue to sustain, and that's what we're looking for. That type
And
of
Richard doesn't have to sit there and say, where's that money coming
He'll be able to say at some point, I'm done, we're finished, look at this. So he'll have his
Never
own,
finished.
he'll have a 5-year plan. So on this page,
The board, just very briefly, the board authorized, some of you may recall, a capacity study for the water treatment plant. So there is such a thing out there, but building it into Mark's CIP, I think is important.
Yeah.
that's a good point. So we have these ad hoc studies out there that we can then fold into this greater dashboard view.
When we were working on, when we were doing the upgrades, when we were still in the engineering phase, we had Hazen and Sawyer look at the lake and look at future capacity. So we've got some numbers from that that's you know, fairly reasonably curved.
This is good.
And then just finally on this diagram, to our point about if we're going to construct a project in a certain year, you can see that down the left-hand column of this table, you've got some planning, some design and land features, construction, inspection, admin, and contingencies for a total cost. Obviously, some of this planning and design and land acquisition can occur years ahead of your actual construction. And again, we have to identify those costs because sometimes it can be 12 months to 24 months to do design and acquisition. We want to make sure that we're actually hitting those targets as far as execution. So that's where we are on that. So at that point, I'll stop my screen share and let's just throw it back over to Mark and have Mark pull up maybe just an example, just show you a brief example of how we look on the schedule we're creating. Do you have that capability?
So,
You've got to make that bigger.
all right, I'll make that.
Don't even try it.
Need a telescope to see that.
Okay, that's good.
So this is the master spreadsheet that I've been working on, and I'll just give you summary of where we're at and where we're going. So this is the list of the categories that I've broken our system down into for the CIP. Like I said before, we have 100 through 108. So the raw water intake and transmission, that's just the, from the dam to the water treatment plant and the pump stations in between. Obviously, the water treatment facility, you know what that is. Distribution lines, all of our water system, all 140 or so miles of that is part of that. Water distribution pump stations, water towers. We have 7 water towers throughout the service area. Wastewater collection system lines. That's all the sewer lines and associated manholes. The wastewater lift stations and force mains. So we've got, I believe it's 47 or 48 total lift stations that fall under that category. And the wastewater treatment plant facility and the administrative office and operations. So what I've got here is the progress of, I have to zoom out a little bit so we can fit it on
That's fine.
the screen.
Yeah.
So this all links into each. I have separate tabs here for each one of these categories where I have the projects listed. But just from what I have identified so far, we're looking at $80 million worth of capital work. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to identify every project that we can possibly find, put it on the list. So it will end up being hundreds of millions on this list when it's done. But obviously we can't do that in 10 years. So most of those projects will be listed in a 10+ year category, but I'm trying to just identify everything we can right now. I'll go to.
And I think it's important that, we gave the board an example of what we're working on. So we're following that template. So yeah, pull up one project or two that you have regarding that so they can see that detailed schedule again of what we're working on.
So this is under the wastewater collection system. I've got 31 projects entered right now. So we've got all these projects here. That's the total, that's the summary of all the category, but then we've got each individual project. So for example, this project is identified here. Now the sewer, this was identified through the asset inventory assessment that was done in 2018. A lot of projects came out of that. So most of the projects that are identified on here are from the AIA, in addition to additional projects that our own staff has come to us and said these are high priority. So I've entered 30, and I think I've got another 30 to enter. I think there's 60 or so sewer projects that we've identified right now that need to be done. But so this project area, I've got an estimated engineering cost, the construction cost broken up over 2 fiscal years, construction admin over 2 fiscal years, contingency, and I'll probably continue to refine these. Some of these are just pretty rough ballpark estimates right now. But
so none of these sewer projects that you've identified will be taken care of when we do the I-85 sanitary sewer project.
I-85 is on here, but
that won't affect these projects, are not part of
these
that.
are in addition to.
Okay.
These projects are ones that were identified from, I think we got a $500,000 grant to do the asset inventory assessment. And that's when we discovered the big problem with I-85 and some other areas within the system.
I'm not sure if those were related. They may have been before my time, but I know that we had a separate grant just to do a condition assessment in certain areas. And I know there was some additional engineering work that came forward to do the other analysis. They may have been part and parcel. I'm not sure, but your point is well taken. And we touched on this, is that condition assessments are important. So our annual TV and inspection, we're actually grading the sewer lines. And that's what we did through a hydrostructures grant contract to the state. So we have that condition assessment done, and that's what's feeding into our schedule here. The AIA grant that we weren't successful on most recently, but we're going to try again, was going to be some condition assessment for our water pipe system. So once we get that, we'll end up with individual water project areas identified and costs for those so that we can identify those priorities. That feeds into here. Additionally, we also have infrastructure at our plants that needs work on to go on the schedule, some digesters possibly. So
Steps at the water plant, dear
steps.
God.
us to look at.
Before
And
I
there's-
retire, I want those steps.
And we have pump stations yet that we're going to be evaluating. I mean, I think this is going to be part of our program approach. But you're going to see that even though we're working towards a framework here, which is really important, it's going to take us several years to get through all the condition assessments to modify this plan to really identify the high priority projects and maintenance projects moving out. So this isn't done. In fact, I don't think that my experience, you're never done with this.
No,
This
I
is
never.
iterations, iterations.
Updates.
Yep, updates. So.
And then there's forces outside our control that contribute. And you always have the Falls Lake rules.
Right.
If they change those, that's going to accelerate some things that we have to do with the wastewater treatment plant and
Right.
discharge. And it will probably cause us to have to accelerate our looking at water reuse or maybe further treatment of the effluent. So, you know, we can have some things thrown in there from time to time that's going to take you off course. Cause you to have to, something you thought was 10 years down the road, maybe
15.
yeah, and something, you know, you wanted to push 10 years plus, ends up being 5.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
But with this document, every project on here, I've also started working on the Word document with that, where we've got maps
Right.
for each area, defining that table, saying how much of each size pipe is.
You are earning your paycheck, my friend.
This puts us
This
in
is amazing.
such a better place than we've ever been before.
Oh, yeah.
Having this and working towards this.
Yeah, and it all ties back to the strategy.
But I think realistically, you know, by the end of, well, in the next couple of months, I'd like to have a 10-year CIP ready to present, but everyone needs to know it's not complete.
Right.
You know, I think the
It's ever evolving.
well,
It's a breathing document.
I would say that
Yeah.
the first, I think we can get the next 2 to 3 years nailed down pretty
Right.
accurately. Beyond that, it'll be a shot in the dark, and then there still will be a lot of projects that we haven't identified yet. They're gonna have to go in here, just like the water distribution side of this. I've met with our staff and we've identified a dozen or so projects that we know that need to be done, and I've added those here. But that does not include the whole asset inventory assessment that we want to do on the whole network. So I anticipate whenever that is done, had we got that grant that we applied for,
Right.
it would have identified another 30, 40, 50 projects. So it's.
Why do you think we didn't get that grant? I mean,
Others
is
that
it something
applied.
we did wrong
Oh,
or?
no, a lot of people applied for that grant, so we just kind of got pushed out along with 100 other applicants.
Okay.
So we're part of a large.
The need,
pool.
it was need-based, I guess, and their need was stronger than ours.
Apparently so.
Somebody's.
Or is it
It's
scored?
kind of like
based
the
on each
recreation grant
component?
that everybody wants.
They scored, but I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
figured they
based on
scored
need
it
as
and
well.
we may have just missed a couple of points.
Okay.
So it's, from what I understand, that was very competitive.
Mhm.
There was a lot of people applied, a lot of.
Yeah.
And you gotta remember it. As dire as our needs are,
Some people
there's
are-
other smaller systems out here, smaller than us, that are so far behind us.
Right.
That in such dire need. That we want everything we can get to push us to the next level. But there's so many that's trying to get to our level.
Right.
They have a category called stressed systems, which NCDQ defines. They've got different ways they define that, but we are not on that list of
Okay.
a distressed
Well,
system.
that's good.
But there are
Yeah,
a
we're
lot
not
that are.
stressed.
That's good.
Yeah. So they get a higher priority, obviously,
Right.
for
Mhm.
funding and these type of projects as well. So, all right, well, I'd like to wrap up the CIP.
Okay, great. Update.
If
Thanks,
I
Mark.
may, is that okay with the
Thank you.
board?
Yeah.
Mark,
Yes.
anything,
Good work,
last
Mark. Thank
comments, Mark? Y'all good? Kind of summarized already for us?
Amazing.
A lot of work. Hopefully we'll have something good for you to look at soon.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
It just
Richard,
takes
any
time.
comments on CIP?
Take your time. We don't need
I'm
sticker
good.
shock.
Wait to see the money in the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to.
We'll have a different discussion when he gets that 80.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, along with this plan, there's the possibility of getting some grants along the way.
Right, right.
That will change the whole outlook at
Maybe
time
the
frame.
administration will give us another $5 million play money.
I didn't know we had play money. but-
ARPA funds is play money.
I missed that too.
All right, so then returning to our agenda, next item, FY 22-23 personnel and position review follow-up discussion. I put this item on the agenda for today. We were having some discussion about some of the positions last week, and one especially the communications person, which we know how important this is to the organization. And Dr. Jordan, I appreciate the comments that you had for that. In fact, it didn't take me long to go over and talk to our HR manager and ask her to get in touch with you to have that same conversation, just to hear it from you so that you can develop some things here and continue to work on from that. Commissioner Kaczynski, I wasn't sure if you had any other additional comments about that, or the fact that you know that your executive director is doing the communications and the board secretary work and everything else at this point. So I know that was one of your topics last week, a little bit of concern. So let's go back to the committee here.
Well, I was wondering, I don't know how much time is involved with the secretary position, but to me, calling that job for the communication director, PIO, would tie into the secretary of the board position, because to get the agendas out and all this other stuff, and to free up our executive director who gets paid millions of dollars, and he can't get to the work that we've asked him to do because he's doing this. So I was wondering if we could combine that position, the public information officer, communication person, and give them the secretarial duties also, and make it a full-time position, if it's possible.
Okay, well, if I just may add a tidbit here, I've been doing the board duties, I think, since July or August of last year. And I would have to say, just on average, that it is at least 8 to 10 hours a week with everything that I'm doing, just to give you an idea of the load. I'm getting it done, obviously, but you're right, things are getting pushed on the back burner during that full day, once a week, that I'm focusing on just typing minutes or doing something else, which is highly important. So I just want to add that back on the table. That is a realistic number, quite honestly. And as I presented it last week, just a reminder that the position we have presently for communications, let's leave it at communications, we're 30 hours a week with full benefits, if I remember correctly, right, Richard?
That's correct.
That's where we are positioned, and that's what the board has funded through this fiscal year. So that's just where we sit, just to give you some perspective. So if the board is interested in pursuing something along those lines, or has some questions, we might be able to provide you with some information on what that 10 hours extra per week, or 40 hour a week versus 30 would cost, just so that you know the delta. But
And I think we might get a better candidate if it's a full-time position. I mean, I know it's 30 plus benefits, and benefits are usually what's important to a lot of people these days. But if we made it a full-time position, it might be more appealing, and we may get more candidates. And then you could get back to your job, and we would have a secretary again.
So that maybe that's the proposal that the board has at this point, that you may be willing to consider adding that 10 hours, but making sure that 10 hours goes to the secretary's portion of the job,
Exactly.
not just communications, because there's going to be a night meeting or two.
Yeah.
There's other preparations that have to go on. It's kind of all, could be part of the communications stream that we have here.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if you can do it within those hours, and we can get a full-time person in here, fill in that spot. We've been waiting for over a year to fill that spot, and we've got to do something. And instead of hiring 2 part-time people, secretary, and just let's get one person, and they can do the job description would be both duties.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea.
And then Scott can get back to his job.
And I would appreciate working with somebody in that context as well for everything that they would be doing. And also, you've noticed, I'm sure, at the board meetings, got a lot of dials that I'm turning, trying to concentrate on keeping us all square, which has distracted me from my presentations. But Richard, kind of a cold call here, but do you happen to have any perspective on just what a increase this would be to our overall budget or just for a person, another 10 hours a week?
Based on the pay scale you presented last week and the materials, I assume we're talking about still a grade 11, probably, likely.
I'm not sure if there was a really recommendation to take that person out of that level where they currently sit.
Sure, you brought your other one, I didn't.
If, assuming you left them at the current pay grade, of course, it's going to depend on whether you hire them at the minimum, mid-range,
Right.
or maximum. But typically, to add that extra 10 hours with the associated taxes, retirement percentages, the insurance is going to stay the same, of course, because they're
Yeah.
already qualified. You'd roughly be looking at about $12,000 increase in operating expenses at the minimum
Yeah, that's.
pay grade, 15 at the mid, 19-ish at the max.
Okay.
So you're talking 12 to 19,000. If you assumed mid-range, which is kind of what we do for budget,
Right.
you're talking about 15, roughly 15,000.
So that's not gonna affect
Yeah,
our
It's not that
budget
bad.
too, but that's good.
And they would stay in the grade 11, correct?
At grade 11, that's correct. Now, if you move them to a higher grade, of course, those numbers would incrementally increase by about 5%.
But
What suggestion did the HR director have for the title?
The HR manager has not provided me with the title yet at this point since last week's meeting. So
Okay.
we're just having these discussions now, and waiting for some follow-up discussion with
Yeah.
Dr. Jordan, or just to have her repeat with our HR manager what she said. But the HR
Like a
manager has
specialist
also
sort of
had
thing.
conversations with me about her concerns in filling this job, and do we have it positioned, not positioned correctly, but described, titled. These are some of the same things that the
Yeah.
finance committee talked about as well. So that's where we sit with that. And we just thought that this would be a good opportunity just to find out if the board had any further consideration. And Richard, thank you for doing the back of the napkin for us there on that. Appreciate that. Just to give you an idea of that thought that we're talking about, if you want to recommend that we move in that direction. And if you do, and we'll get through the rest of our agenda, if there's anything else that you have as far as comments or recommendations to add to our draft budget, we will then now pretty much be able to kind of close this out, move forward, and Richard could start to then fine tune the actual budget, the budget ordinance, and look at our reliance on fund balance, those type of things, which is really our next progression moving forward. So again, let me just throw this back to the finance committee. Again, I saw some nods and some agreements. Would you
I read.
like us to proceed with this? Is this your
Yeah.
recommendation?
I would support that, yes.
Okay,
Me too.
thank you. Appreciate that.
So you're gonna be fired as secretary, you got that?
Excuse me?
I don't think
Fired
they're
as
removed?
secretary. You'll be
I don't
removed as
think he will
secretary.
hate that at
For
all.
the next meeting? No.
I don't,
Okay.
geez, wouldn't that be nice?
No, I'm glad to do it. I'll just leave it at that.
So one little question, when we were doing part-time with the communication thing, it was a kind of you could work from home deal. So would that stay?
We
Because the secretary position only needs to be here.
call it hybrid now. It's how we
Okay.
work on it. So there's opportunities for that. So we really don't frame it, but we do have opportunities for some
Right.
flex work,
Okay,
digital work, on-site work. So
Most people, yeah, familiar with flex or hybrid.
because that's a nice option also.
exactly, as long as it meets our needs, the organization's
Exactly.
needs, that's our primary focus. So. All right, a couple more items on here for us. We've got any other topics here? So I'd ask the finance committee, is there anything else that you want to slot into that section?
So do we think that we can keep the budget the way it was presented last week? With this change, do you think it'll,
Is now a good time to update that number?
Oh, sure, yeah. I think
Ordinance.
it's appropriate.
So as we mentioned last week, there were a couple of pending items that we're still waiting to tweak, and we said those numbers may change. I think we've got those in place now.
am I gonna have a heart attack?
No.
Okay,
It only changed fund balance roughly 65,000, which is back up to where the
oh, you said
ordinance
that
was,
might
and then we
happen.
dropped it,
Right,
and now
yeah.
we're back up to that number.
Yeah,
So if we assume that we increase the budget approximately 15,000, now don't hold me to that number, because when I dropped in that salary change you just mentioned, you just approved changing in the budget, it may be 16,000, maybe 14,000.
Yeah.
But roughly, we're talking about a fund balance use of 640,000.
Okay,
Of that 230, of course, is unfunded depreciation. So you're looking at about 408,000 with this change that we're talking about today
Mhm.
of operating fund balance being used, true cash being used.
So instead of 218, it'd be 640?
218 now, where did you get the 218? Refresh my memory.
In section 1, it says transfer from fund balance appropriate. It shows
I think
218, 543.
That's the current year that we're in there
Oh,
for reference.
sorry.
So flip on over a couple of
proposed
There it
pages.
is.
16,
It was 618, 366.
366.
So now we're talking about maybe
640.
340-ish.
Okay,
I mean, 640-ish.
640, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
okay.
That's not bad.
That's not too bad of a sticker shock. That's fine.
Now, of that total, that's what Richard was saying, there's a portion of $200,000 that is dedicated to our depreciation. So it becomes, it nets out at 400.
Roughly 400,000. That's going to
Okay.
be a cash impact, a true fund balance impact. The
Right.
others unfunded depreciation. So
Okay,
just keep in your head 405,000.
Okay,
And that's kind of the general rule.
You're comfortable with that?
that's the question. You're comfortable with that? No, he wants.
Mark's laughing because
He wants nothing.
I'm a very conservative finance director, so fund balance use always
Here,
concerns
have
me.
another chocolate.
I-
You'll agree to anything.
But I will say that we have a healthy fund balance and a healthy cash availability. So yes, that does not scare me, especially in the face that the board and the finance committee may be recommending a new rate model a
right.
year down the road.
Mhm.
So I think Seguasa can comfortably absorb that in 1 year. I'll say the same thing I made in the comments last week. I will have to be very careful as we approve budget amendments during the year to not let that 400,000 grow to $1 million. Then I'd get concerned, but so we may be a little more conservative on budget amendment approvals or budget amendment recommendations to the board in that fiscal year.
So if you come into the room at a board meeting and you're doing this, I know there's something really wrong.
You know, I may not be on board with the BA you're getting ready to get. the budget amendment to get.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, I'm glad that you had prepared us for that last week, that it might change, and so that's not so.
Yeah, I would
much a
say that
sticker
it
shock.
may tweak, and then again, realistically, if there were additional changes, which there were today, it would change again. So we're trying to position ourselves after these two meetings to be able to say, okay, is the finance committee satisfied with where we are such that you're going to recommend that we build our budget off of those values?
Right.
If you weren't, we would have another meeting, and that's how we would proceed, so. Okay, so.
And next steps, if there are no further changes, then we would proceed, I would proceed to finalize a proposed budget for the finance committee and the board.
And I think that's where
Yeah,
we
that's
are.
where we are. Unless you had some changes.
Uh-uh.
And then our budget calendar, which I don't have in front of us today, puts us where we have a public hearing coming up at our April board meeting, and then we have our first opportunity in May at our May board meeting
Maybe we can get right on schedule.
to approve the budget. And if the board does not approve the budget at that point or wants to make modifications at the May meeting, then we would do it at the June board meeting. Once again, knowing that at some point we have to have this done before the start of the fiscal year, so
Right.
that would just incorporate additional meetings in the month of June to make sure that we can get that. So. All right, any other comments from the committee members?
I just want to thank you both for finding Reptelis, because I know that before Dr. Jordan became our chairman, I said this at the very first meeting that I attended is, we gotta do something about these rates. And you guys have done a great job at trying to get that done for me. And I know things take time, and I wish it could be faster, but it can. So I have to practice a little bit more patient, but I am extremely pleased that what we spent that money on for that study, because these people have done a superb job. And I know that you and Richard were very influential in getting this done, and I appreciate it so
Thank you.
much. I know that it's best for our customers, and that's the one thing Linda and I really
Yeah.
agree on totally, is whatever's best for our customers and Seguas.
Yes.
And no revenue loss, we can do this without that. That's the best part.
revenue neutral is what we're aiming
Yeah.
for, right?
Revenue
Yep.
neutral.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, yeah.
thank you. Dr. Jordan, anything? further?
Just, I echo what Commissioner Kaczynski said. I mean, it's long overdue. And I appreciate Mark's presentation and what Richard does and what you do going above and beyond to making sure that we are informed and doing what we need to do as well as your additional duties. So I just appreciate the two opportunities we've had to meet together as a finance committee and prepare ourselves. And I think we are in a good position to move forward and be prepared for our public hearing in April.
I think the organization is in a great position. And I know that your leadership is a big part of that.
Thank you.
And I know that a lot of people do not realize what you three do and what the whole staff at Seguasa does.
It's the team that does it.
And
Yeah.
you've got the cohesiveness of the
Mhm.
team, of the people that are out working at 3 o'clock in the morning, fixing broken water lines in the freezing cold temperatures, and Mark taking me on tours around the wastewater plant, which I absolutely enjoy. You are a great tour guide. You really
That's my
are.
calling
And I
card.
can't wait for Robert to have his tour with you. Have you scheduled it
Maybe
yet?
a little
Not yet.
Bus with the Fringe is in your
Yeah.
future, right? But,
Yeah, you
all-
could go to
all-
Disney World to be a tour
Right,
guide.
Tour
you know?
guide.
All fun aside, I think that I would like to thank the board. We have an excellent board of directors here at Seguasa.
It feels positive.
It's very positive. We're moving forward. There's great momentum moving forward. There's even greater heights for us to achieve in the future. But some of the things that the board's achieved this last year, especially the strategic plan, is really the foundation for us as well. But we have a great board for us right now, and we are working very well together, and I can see us continuing to do that. So
Yeah,
very good.
absolutely.
All right, well, our last item is adjournment, so Dr. Jordan,
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All
We
in
are
favor?
all in favors.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your day.
thank you so
You
much.
too.
Appreciate it.
Get out early.
I-
We're doing good.
Yeah.